The question is, how do you know what age and how do you plan it? And I was talking with a financial firm, and they said they think as a fiduciary, they cannot plan for dying with zero. And I went, well, so you're telling me you're going to ignore the client's wishes, which, by the way, really interesting debate, and I might be in trouble at some point. Like, I'm an SEC registered advisor. We have to have some assumption on age. We've set aside money for long-term care. We've set aside Social Security. We've set aside some cash. If they live longer, they have a safety net. It works there. Now, I will say, this is one of those like mind shifters. I was reading on Reddit again. I hate Reddit, but I love it. The question was a hypothetical. What happens if medicine gets to a place where now we're living, we don't have old age to die from, and we're living hundreds of years? And I'm like, wow, am I tired? I'm not sure I want to live hundreds of years. Beautiful thought, but here's the thing. Still got the safety net at the end. Put off Social Security to 70. We got something there. We spend in between. But what actually happens with clients, they're so reluctant to spend what they saved that here's the discussion I have most often. At some point in a child-free person's life, they are working for their estate, which is not a priority. I usually can get them to do is switch jobs or do something different. Go open that cupcake shop they want to open or whatever. But there's this whatever we call middle-class work ethic or Protestant work ethic or whatever that push people to keep working. The discussion of 4% rule, I'm not so worried about the money, the numbers. I'm worried about every dollar you're earning is not improving your life. I call it Marie Kondoing your life. Get rid of things that don't bring you joy and do more of the things that do.
Welcome to the Childfree Wealth Podcast, hosted by Bree and Dr. J, Certified Financial Planner. Here we discuss life and finances as it relates to being child-free. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult your advisor before implementing any ideas heard on this podcast.
How many parents in the room? Wow. I scared them all off. Now, I'm not going to ask if you're all child-free because for some people that's like coming out. We're not public. We actually, I'll show you a little bit, we did a billboard in Times Square celebrating being child-free, and we asked people to share their life. And we only had like 3 people willing to do it. Because they're like, there's a difference between being child-free and being out on a billboard in Times Square child-free. Just a little definitions. Child-free in this case is going to be people who don't have kids and aren't planning on having kids by choice. Childless being not by choice. And we're really talking about people who are permanently childless. None of those terms are set in stone. It's just the ones I use. If anyone's attended the Child-Free Convention, the Childless Summits, every time there's a session on defining these terms, I'm not going to try to do that. This says a conversation. We got a small enough group. You can ask questions throughout, and I'm not past bribing people. So if you ask a good question, I'll give you the copy of the book. If you ask a bad question, I don't know what I'm going to do. But, we'll let the audience judge. A little about me. People ask me why did you pick to serve child-free folks? And the answer is because I am one. My wife and I are child-free. And when I was studying to become a CFP, I found out there was never once a mention of being child-free. All of the financial literature, walk through the halls, well, actually they're closed now, but walk through the halls, it all assumes either pre or post kids. Kids will always be in the picture. All the life planning, even the 7-step method for financial planning for CFPs includes kids. So my question was how weird are we? Now, I have to give a caveat. My wife and I are both PhDs, so we are weird, okay? We sit around, we talk about research studies. I'm Dr. J, she's Dr. Z, because otherwise I'd be Dr. Jay-Z. So we are weird. But the question was, how weird are we in finance, in life? I didn't know the term child-free existed at the time. I just knew we didn't have kids. Come to find out, I found a Reddit group for child-free. Anyone who's found that, that's a interesting cesspool. I say that. For my book, I posted an ad saying, share your child-free life with me, because I'm collecting stories. It got flagged as hate speech. Hate directed at me, hate directed at other groups. I'm like, ooh. I started researching this. And my wife and I, we're in the weird place, I guess, by choice. My wife has a 50-50 chance of dying if she gets pregnant. That kind of took care of it. And people ask me, well, what did you want to do before that? I'm like, I don't know, it was 15 years ago. I'm not sure I remember anything. But I started researching this. And to that end, I've started a financial planning firm specifically for it. I've actually worked through podcasts, all that. But one of the interesting things is I run a child-free financial planning firm in Mississippi. And in case you missed it, over the past year or two, reproductive rights have become a big issue, specifically in Mississippi. And we actually had to move our firm out of Mississippi to protect the privacy of our clients. Our governor said, hey, we're not tapping your phones or reading your mail, but we're not currently trying to outlaw contraception, currently. So we had to make some different shifts. It's things you don't think about, but regulated industry, state come and read all my files, so we had to do some things a little different. So here's some stats. Depending on how you want to look at this, there was a study out of Michigan looking at adults 18 and over. And by the way, there are links on all this, and there's in the app, you can download the PowerPoint so you can actually get to the links because you won't be able to type those in. I don't have the fancy QR codes, so I apologize. I guess I'm the old one in the room. Bottom line is, about 25% of the US are child-free or permanently childless. And when people see these numbers, they go, well, I don't know if I believe those. What do you all think? You believe it? 25%, 1 in 4? You think higher? Or will be higher. Yeah. My wife's an epidemiologist, and she has access to medical records, and that's what she does. So I said, hey, just for fun, now, I'm telling you, we're weird. Do an analysis of how much sterilizations have gone up since Roe was overturned. It went through the roof already. Okay? The U.S. Census looked at adults 55 and older and found it was about 16, 18% are childless. Now, they only care about biological children, so it's a definition thing. But it's a huge growing number. What people don't realize, we're here, but they don't realize we're such a large group. My argument of this is, hey, if 25% of the U.S. is child-free or childless, 25% of our financial content should reflect that. Have you seen 25% of the content looking at that? I asked the question in one of my studies, why do people choose to be child-free? And by the way, this is where you grade yourself and see which one you picked. Most people picked more than one. Starts off with kind of like just didn't want to have kids. But then it gets into finances and freedom and environment. And then it gets really interesting because there's this little thing about don't like kids. So I was trying to buy software for my company, and I love this. I wanted to buy this software. They said, hey, who do you serve? I say, I serve child-free people. They said, okay, you hate kids. And I'm like, no. I'm trying to buy your software. Okay, we're going to go with the judgments. But then it gets into interesting things like medical issues, environment, not wanting to pass down generational trauma. The bottom line of this data is that more likely people who are child-free have put more thought into being child-free than people who have kids. You know, everybody always gets that question, well, maybe you'll regret it. I'd much rather regret not having kids than regret having kids. The stats, by the way, in parental regret, about 17% of parents are willing to admit they regret having kids. I'm not trying to convince anyone to be child-free or not. I'm just sharing the facts. When he's really starting looking at all of it, The U.S. Census looked at childless adults over 55, and here's some important things out of here. They found that 32.1% of childless folks will never marry versus 2.5% of parents. In my data, if you ask why child-free people get married, ignore love and all that fun stuff. Healthcare. They get married for healthcare and benefits. My clients, I got couples that have been together for 15 years. They're like, I don't need the healthcare benefits. I'm not going to get married. Or I got groups or solos or whatever it is. There's this huge percentage. There was a study, Fidelity actually looked at it and looked at the soloists. And they found the cost for being a soloist, single, no kids, is somewhere between $400,000 and $1 million across your lifetime. Because everything's built for more than one. They call it the single tax. So you can't split housing, you can't split electric. $400,000 and $1 million across your lifetime is what you have to pay just to exist. My wife and I split everything. You don't think about you split a gallon of milk. It's everything, and it adds up. By the way, if you want to see one of the fun ones in the financial software, try to tell it's a couple that's not married. Right Capital just fixed this so that you can do this, but automatically it assumes every couple is married. Be careful on that. The other thing that was interesting in here is that 2.5% of childless folks admitted or said they got any financial support from family over 55. This is that question of who's going to take care of you when you're older. But in the same study, adults 55 and older, 1.5% of parents got any support. For the math nerds in here, that means parents get less support than the childless folks. The bottom line is, we're all screwed. We all have to figure out our long-term care. There's no answer behind that. Now, you all, since you all decided you are not parents, or you voted that way, didn't want to admit it in this group, might have seen the Childfree bingo at some point. These are all the questions we get asked that we ask people, please do not ask. I talk a lot to financial folks about Childfree folks because they don't realize we exist. And I'm going, hey, please stop asking these questions. So I was working on a blog article with a large site, and we were having a debate with the editor on whether or not there's systematic biases against Childfree folks. What do y'all think? Okay, I'm with you. They did not agree. And we got a discussion about asking questions in the system about, do you have kids? Are you planning on having kids? Wherever you're going with it. And then the way I do it is I ask, do you have kids? Yes, no. Do you ever plan on having kids? Yes, no, maybe, or I'm child-free, childless. And it says, if you choose child-free, childless, I'll never mention kids again. That's kind of what I want financial people to get to. The editor was talking about, like, I think I need to know why they don't want to have kids. I was like, why? How does that impact your finances? They said, well, I just can't understand it. You don't have to. I get people ask me all the time, why don't you have kids? And then I tell them, well, my wife could die. And they're like, I didn't want to ask you that question now. Like, be careful what you ask. When you start kind of working through these bingo questions, you realize how much bias is in there. I was just having a conversation on the floor here, and they're like, well, I get things are different with kids, with child-free folks. You don't have family. I'm like, hold on. We have family. It's a different structure. They're like, oh, I didn't realize I said that. It's all the language that's built in there, that pronatalist bias, that we have to work our way through. Now, you've all lived it. You've probably seen these questions at some point or another. I've got a few family members. They can fill out the whole bingo card on me. It doesn't matter. I'm 45. They're still asking the questions. I run a child-free financial planning firm, and they're still asking me what I'm going to have. All right, whatever. I bring this up just to talk about the bias. Now, I mentioned this before. Most people don't know that August 1st is International Child-Free Day. We hosted a billboard, that is Times Square for those people that haven't visited New York, celebrating Child-Free Day. We did it as a kind of press fun thing and just to support the community. Had a lot of great fun press in the beginning, great social media engagement. You're all creators, you understand that. And then about 4 o'clock, all of the interactions went away. I was kind of like, what happened? Somebody got indicted at 4 o'clock. What's interesting about this was somebody we focused on. She shared her life, Sabu, because she's a child-free person. And the response was, you are being used as a willing pawn to a global psyop trying to go, what? These are the judgments that we get. One of the challenges of marketing to child-free people is the idiots on social media. Y'all with me? You understand the idiots on social media? And I am not great at ignoring them because I want to engage, and I really shouldn't. And I should just not read them. The best thing I ever heard, I was doing a panel with other authors, and they were talking about how to deal with social media trolls. They said, find a friend who watches your account and you watch theirs, and you just block everybody else because you don't see the people. So your friend can actually if there's a security concern or, something you should really know, your friend gets to see the bad stuff about you. You get to see the bad stuff about them. It's just a little save your heart. Any of you child-free people, if you're going to go publicly child-free, think about that. Now that you know who child-free people are, let's talk about finances. The first thing I got to dispel is this belief that because you're child-free, these checks come raining down from the sky and make you rich. For any of the child-free folks in here, has the check fairy come by? Okay. It is not true that having kids makes you poor or not having kids makes you rich. When I did interviews for my book on child-free wealth, I had somebody in there her whole goal was she had moved from being on an air mattress to being on a bed. She's barely keeping her head above water. The way I look at it is if she had a kid, she would drown. The data says, this going back to the census, that single, childless women actually have the highest net worth by about $2,000. And it's not statistically significant. The next highest is fathers. You're not rich. But what we do say is living a life of child-free wealth means you have time, money, and freedom to do what you enjoy. Y'all with me? Now, that problem is that can almost be too much flexibility for people. When you can do anything, the analysis paralysis sets in. I got a few people nodding, going, uh-huh. I'm doing this with my company right now. Like, I do a lot of fun things with my company, and then I'm like, yeah, I'm an introvert. These conferences, not my happy space. So maybe I should find somebody else to do that. You know, you can make those choices. My wife and I, she got a great job opportunity. We moved 1,200 miles. We can't. It becomes the flexibility. Some of the other things that happen, child-free folks want to have a goal to die with zero or not pass on generational wealth. The way I look at it is my nephew, if he gets, we have 3 nephews. If they get 10,000 or 100,000, that's fine. If they get $1 million, I made a mistake. Because either they could have used that throughout their life or I could have used it. I made a mistake. Now here's the thing. If you're going to die with zero, that breaks all the financial planning. Because all the financial planning is based on Monte Carlos and saying, hey, I want to keep running it up. It also, I can say this to your friends, it also is a built-in conflict of interest for anyone that's charging a percentage-based AUM model. Because your planner wants your numbers to go up. You want it to go down. I don't know. Now, one of the other interesting things, and we're going to do a little poll in this group since you all said you're my friends. I'm going to give you 2 options for retirement. One is like you shut the light switch off, I'm never working again. The other one's a dimmer switch, kind of like I want to cut back, I want to do what I enjoy, I want to do something different. How many people want to like completely cut out work, never work again? 2, 3. How about the dimmer switch? Vast majority. Child-free folks become non-retirees. If retirement's not your goal and you're not trying to pass on money to the next generation, financial planning gets a little different. And by the way, that becomes a challenge both systematic and in the structure. We've also got, we're going to come back to the garden and the rose. We have to plan for long-term care, and there's so much more. So let me do a quick plug. If you haven't read this book, read it. Die with Zero. How many people have read Die with Zero? Cool. Everybody else, this immediately goes onto your audiobook list or whatever. I don't read much anymore, so it's all audiobooks. And he talks about maximizing time, health. When you're young, you got less money, but you have health. At the end of your life, you have more time and money, but you may not have the health. Well, child-free folks are trying to embrace this. Now, by the way, I don't follow the book exactly, but the concept works. Really, they're trying to do that bell curve for their net worth. Bring it down. I spend more time talking to my clients about spending money than saving money. How many people here are financial planners? Anybody? We got a couple. So that's the Monte Carlo that everybody does, to test and see if you're running out of money. Well, this person here, I just grabbed one randomly, 64% chance of success. I'm good with that for a child-free person because I'm trying to go like 50-50 chance they're going to run out of money. If it's 90% success, that's a 9% failure. Now, for my financial planner friends, does it freak you out if it's going to say they run out of money? Okay, that's the problem. We actually take this concept of non-retirees and dying with zero and put it together with something we call FILE. Financial Independence Live Early. Now, I know we're in the FIRE world here, okay? I get it. But if you're not going to retire, FIRE doesn't fit. Also, the 4% safe withdrawal rate assumes you want to save the principal, which die with zero doesn't work. So FILE is really about that dimmer switch and investing in you, in the life you want to live versus investing in the stock market. By the way, messes with clients' brains. I mean, this is one of those like that, wait, I've always been told to save, I got to do this, I got to do this. That's the standard life plan that says you have to have the American dream, the 2.5 kids, the dog, the white picket fence, and the house. All of that's a choice. And when you throw out the kids part, the rest becomes a choice and you can invest in yourself. Where you can actually find ways to invest in you early in your life. I got somebody that lived in the FIRE lifestyle. Originally it was FIRE, like it was like deep in the FIRE literature, like one of those hardcore, I think he was going to make soap soon, you know what I'm talking about. The ones that are like saving, like, I don't want to say they're living on beans and rice because that's a different plan, but same concept. And we had this discussion of what really matters. He said, well, what I really want to do is hike the AT trail. Cool, let's do it. He's like, what? I'm 30, whatever, he's 35, 37, mid-30s. Can I really do that? I'm like, yeah. It's a return on investment. It's in you. Those are the type of decisions you can be making. By the way, it'll slow down his retirement. But retirement's not the goal. It's a different way of thinking. They also embraced what my wife and I embrace, the gardener and the rose. Now, you may have heard of this as the gardener and the flower. I say the gardener and rose because my wife is not just any flower, she's a rose. So I have to say that because it's getting recorded, and when I tell stories about her, I have to give her the good clip. In the gardener and the rose, when we have dual income couples, now, by the way, technicality, Dink is dual income, no kids. Dinky is no kids yet. If you're on the yet plan, you're not on the child-free plan. Stay on the standard plan. And that's when people get confused about, because they're like, well, my kids are off at college, I'm child-free. No. We're talking about never going to be part of your plan. Now, some parents can embrace this too, but this is the child-free spin on it. So the way we do this is in a dual income couple, one person's providing support while the other one's growing. The example I use with the AT Trail, his wife's actually working still. He's doing the AT Trail for 7, 8 months. It works. My wife and I, she's the rose. She got a job offer. We moved 1,200 miles away, packed up the dog, cat, and went because we could do that. I'm in the support role. The thing with the gardener and the rose is the way to do this well is to set a time limit and switch. So when I become the rose, we're going to get in a boat and do the great loop for any boat fans around the U.S. Then we're going to do the world. It doesn't have to be that the rose is growing financially. She's going to support my goal, then. It allows the rose to be a little more selfish, and they should be, in order to grow. Interesting side note, when I see child-free couples and they try to both be growing at the same time, it causes strife. That's why this works. Like 5 years, you're the one growing, we'll move, we'll do whatever we got to do for you, then my turn. It works. The other one that comes in here is sabbaticals. Most of us have worked our entire life and never stopped to think, do we want to do this? Because we just have to. It's what we're told we had to do. I prescribe sabbaticals frequently, and here's the way I do it. 6 months. First 2 months, you watch Netflix. I mean, it could be Hulu, it could be Prime, but you watch some stupid show. Why? Because your brain has been working nonstop forever. You need 2 months to just do nothing. And by the way, what they actually do is they're like, oh, I'm going to go work around the house a lot for the first week or two. And then they finally realize, I really mean watch Netflix. The next 2 months, you're like, what do I want to be when I grow up? Has nothing to do with age. Because what's happened is most of us, our 18-year-old dumb self, by the way, we were all dumb at 18, okay? You can pretend like you were smart at 18, but our dumb self made decisions for us, and we're living a career that they picked, their school or whatever. So we want to have that time. What do you want to do? In the last 2 months, go try it. On my podcast, I have an episode, a couple comes in, they're talking about it. She was working a state job with a pension, which, by the way, we know how rare pensions are nowadays. This is as stable as you can get, working for the state, you got the pension, the good benefits, and hating it. The thing about working a state job is it's the handcuffs and you're just stuck. I said to her, what do you really want to do? She goes, I don't know. We put her on a sabbatical. By pure luck, she tried a few things, and the middle of her sabbatical was NaNoWriMo. For anyone that doesn't know, there's National Novel Writing Month. She wrote a novel. She's now working on getting her first novel published. She's going to run as an author for a couple of years. The fun part about authors, and there's a few in this room, you'll understand this, you either make a lot of money or no money. There's nowhere in between. Who knows? But she's happier than ever. That's common. The other thing we get into these issues is the harder ones, and I was just having a conversation beforehand with somebody on who's going to make the decisions for you when you're older. Now, all of you that are child-free in this room have a homework assignment, and that is to get your will and your power of attorneys in place today. Why? Because the healthcare, government, and financial systems blow up when you don't have next of kin. Blow up. And I can say that. I worked in healthcare. I remember I was a paramedic, and I was at this person's bedside. 6 family members. They have no paperwork, and they're all fighting over what to do with this person who's coding in front of me. And I'm like, so I'm going to pick for you. It was miserable until they found a piece of paperwork. Well, because we don't have a next of kin to make decisions for us, the next choice is the government's making a decision for you. Anyone happy with the government's choice for you? And by the way, if you don't do the will, the government takes your money too. Because they don't try too hard to find your next of kin. I was working with somebody in one state, they posted in the newspaper saying, hey, if you happen to know Jane Smith, she died, so please claim her stuff. When's the last time you read the newspaper for your next of kin, having to pass? Work that road. But one of the issues we end up with is who makes decisions for people when they don't have a family or friend to do it. If you're in California, you can actually get a professional fiduciary to do this. If you're in Georgia, there's one attorney that does it. If you're in Texas, no attorneys will touch it. It's a huge issue because the liability that comes from making medical and financial decisions for people, like who's going to put me in a home? Big issue. This is one we're working on now. We're trying to solve it. I've been working on it for 2 years. Stay tuned. The other one is long-term care. We need to have a plan in our mid-40s. How many people have a plan for long-term care in here? Okay, the rest of you need to get going on this. If you don't have a choice, you end up in Medicaid, which a Medicaid facility, if you haven't visited them lately, is probably not what you want. I had somebody tell me, there are good Medicaid facilities out there. I'm like, there are. Do they have a bed that's open and that you can get in? And the answer is no. So you need to have a plan. My goal is by mid-40s to have either money set aside, a long-term care insurance policy, or say, yes, we're doing Medicaid. And I make people make those choices. The other choice that ends up happening with long-term care, child-free folks, a lot of people are actually looking at the opt-out, death with dignity. That one's a huge problem for paperwork, but we'll get there. When we put it all together, we end up with our 8 no baby steps. Now, you may have heard of the baby steps. That's a little different. This is for people that don't have kids. First 3, really get out of debt, all that, fine. That's all simple. That's the same. Then everything else changes. I'll take you for a quick walk through everything but getting out of debt. Now, by the way, I have people argue me, they want to be in debt. That's fine, whatever. Step 4 is invest towards your goals. Notice I didn't say invest towards retirement. It is completely different when you ask somebody, what are you investing for, when retirement's not the priority. I have clients call me, hey, when can I retire? And my question is, well, do you want to? They go, no. Well, then why are you asking the question? Because all the financial literature says you have to 15% or whatever number towards retirement. You have to have this by a certain date and all that. That changes. Another one, buying a house is a choice, not a requirement for child-free folks. By the way, most times my answer is to rent because child-free folks are more mobile. The editor for my book, I got a second one coming out in December, and she and her dog live a month at a time in a different Airbnb across the country. I never know where they are. Hey, I was in Joshua Tree and I'm in Vermont today. All right, whatever. So it becomes saving for their goals. No baby step 5 changes all the insurance rules. Life insurance, most child-free folks can pass. The only people that can't are people that either have a whole bunch of debt, which by the way was in the first no baby steps, or have some business structure they have to get out. We can skip life insurance, but what we need is disability insurance. For the soloists, that disability insurance is more important than pretty much anything on this setup. Because if you're single with no kids and you got no spouse to help you in a disability, go ahead and try to live off Social Security disability. Now, if anyone's seen that lately, it pays nothing. Now, I also put long-term care insurance in here. One thing on long-term care, if you're working with clients on this or talking about it, a standalone long-term care policy. If it's a life insurance policy with long-term care, you're buying stuff you don't need. By the way, it's expensive. And you know what it's most expensive for? Single childless women. They got 3.7 years of care, and by the way, their costs are much higher. So you got to find a standalone policy. No baby step number 6, estate plan. Got to have this in writing. I also tell my child-free folks, got to have it on your phone, got to give it to your doctor, got to have it everywhere, because you don't have somebody running in to go, oh, by the way, here's their paperwork. And I don't get crazy on which forms are better or whatever. At some point, I'm just get one done and then we can figure out the best solution. The one for who's going to make decisions for you is one of the hardest. I have people, I'm going to bribe my nephew with $15,000 to make decisions for me. Kind of might work, but it's becoming a big issue. Here's one that completely changes everything. Planning for mom and dad. Here's how this works. I call this the financial bingo. You don't have a kid, so you can take care of mom. Anyone here going to have to take care of their parents? Bet you a whole lot more than you think are going to have to take care of your parents. This is becomes a core part of a child-free person's financial plan. What are their boundaries around it? Are they going to live with them or not? What are their finances? How they work it? The only parents I take as clients right now are parents of my child-free folks, because you never know. And it's got to be part of their financial plan, because they could have this great die with zero plan. They're living the file life. Mom and dad need an extra couple $100,000. Becomes a nightmare. And then we end with no baby step 8, die with zero. Now, I don't literally mean they're going to have zero in their bank at the end. I'm still a financial planner, even though I'm child-free, and that would drive me crazy to really get to zero. What we do is we say, okay, put off Social Security till 70. That's a little safety net. Have a plan for long-term care, and that'll cash cushion. Depending on the clients, maybe a couple of years of expenses, 1 or 2 years of expenses. But then we focus on with the clients how to spend the rest. So I had somebody call me up, 10 million plus. They're in their 70s. And they said, hey, I'm worried I'm going to run out of money. Okay, let's look at this. And we did the math. I said, here's the thing. Here's your portfolio gain. There's how this is working. You're going to start spending a whole lot more money to run out. So what we've been working on is actually how to spend more. Which, by the way, if somebody saved and made $10 million all across their life, they're not good at spending money. What we end up doing is actually working on giving plans to match whatever their spending is. It's a guilt routine. For that couple that I'm talking about, we're actually out of plan right now. The goal is to spend $300,000 a year on travel and $300,000 a year on giving. That sounds crazy, but when you really think about the numbers, that's the target. They're not going to get close, but we're trying, because it becomes an issue of how to actually spend and use your money. It starts flipping everything. That's the overarching, and I'm going to open to questions, but I want to give you some resources. Market Watch, Wall Street Journal, CNBC Kids have done a few articles on child-free stuff. You're all going to dive into that. That's also in they're going to cut off the Fidelity one, which we'll get there. But I have a call to action. I don't have to tell you all, because you happen to be the child-free crowd, to be mindful of child-free people. But I do tell that. But we need to start integrating child-free people in our content, in our structures, in our discussions. What's interesting, I was talking to a whole lot of content creators over the past couple days, and a lot of them are like, hey, I'm child-free. I'm like, cool, do you talk about it on your podcast? No. Why? We need to start shifting. We need to start having that conversation. By the way, if you need somebody to be the bad person and go out and say, I'm the child-free person, I'll come on and talk about child-free stuff, and they can yell at me. Because they're like, I'm going to turn off my audience. Well, that's why it's not being served. So my challenge is, if 25% of the U.S. is child-free, can we make 25% of the content? The other thing is, and we're looking at the national endowment, maybe we should be doing research and asking the question, are you child-free? How does that impact your finances? Where does that fit? We should also be talking to brands. We had a great discussion Christmas time last year saying, hey, if brands could actually figure out how to market to child-free folks, we have money. I will tell you who's figured out how to market to child-free folks. Philanthropic arms. They looked at the data and they found child-free people get more money. They figured it out, but it becomes an issue. So, bottom line is, child-free people are different. Talk about it and make sure your financial plans match it. Now, name of the child-free Facebook group, Child-Free Entrepreneurs on Facebook. It's great. We're starting to see it. Now, here's the thing. Watch these stats. The largest child-free content creators, probably Tiffany J. Marie is one of the leader. She got 126,000 followers on Instagram. 20% of the U.S. is child-free. That is nothing. The big child-free groups on Facebook, 20,000 people. And by the way, that's worldwide. It's nothing, percentage-wise. I'm all for the Facebook groups and anything else. So the question was demographics, cities and other areas. Interestingly enough, I look at my clients. The number one place I have clients from, Austin, Texas. I don't know why, but it does. Here's what you're going to find. Yes, there are some areas. I did a thing for ABC7 in San Fran, and they're like, hey, we have more dogs here than kids. Yeah, okay. It's very obvious. The study out of Michigan I use for demographics is the best we've got, and that's only one state. Because there's this bias that's in there. Like, if we ask people if they don't have kids, they may change their mind, so that data is no good. Okay. Now, I will say on the demographics, the conversation changes based on the state and the location. So I went to sell my house in Mississippi, and I had to take down all my child-free wealth signs and stuff because the realtor was worried about things happening to the house or not selling because of it being there. Yeah, New York City. I got a bunch of friends in Denver. They have a meetup for child-free folks. Awesome. Other countries, it's much more open. When you look at the interesting stats, Japan right now, about 1/3 are child-free, which is part of their demographic issue. And that's when people are like, you child-free folks are going to mess up Social Security. Like, yes, because it's a pyramid scheme and it needs growth at the bottom. Not my fault. So the demographics, I hate to say it, the research isn't even there. That's part of what I'm trying to do, is trying to say, by the way, we're here. The child-free community is about 3 times the size of the LGBTQ plus community. Nobody would have guessed that. And by the way, LGBTQ plus community, about 49% say they're child-free.
You mentioned before that the 4% rule behind the whole bell curve thinking, but is there a percent that you lean more towards to help clients do a little bit more of their projections and stuff? Like you do an 8% rule, 6%? Like, where do you go? I know you said there's a bell curve, but I know for me, I help a lot of people that do have families, but I do my own calculations, and I'm just curious, what's the easiest way you deliver that?
Yeah. So the question was, hey, the 4% rule, you said kind of that doesn't work. What number do you use? Yep. Okay. I have no clue. The way I do it is I set aside the money at the end and then set guardrails and say you must spend this much, depending on how we do, returns, we can change over time. Because what I do is because I do the end, Social Security, all that at the end, then I go, okay, let's solve for spending this over your expected lifespan. Because if they spend it too early, they still have their safety net at the end. And then what I'll do is I'll set a guardrail based on what is, and usually I actually have to set a minimum spend, so they have to spend at least a certain amount versus a maximum. It's a different way of thinking. So the question is, how do you determine what age you're living with it? Crystal ball. I mean, seriously, we don't have...
Projection-wise, because that's tangible basis, I'm very curious just how because it's all math-based, and so we're talking actuarial, we're talking how, because if you ask me, I say, I'm definitely going to die before my spouse. I just know it.
So you might make that happen. The question is, how do you know what age and how do you plan it? And I was talking with a financial firm, and they said they think as a fiduciary they cannot plan for dying with zero. And I went, well, so you're telling me you're going to ignore the client's wishes, which, by the way, really interesting debate, and I might be in trouble at some point. I'm an SEC registered advisor. We have to have some assumption on age. We've set aside money for long-term care. We've set aside Social Security. We've set aside some cash. If they live longer, they have a safety net. It works there. Now, I will say, this is one of those mind shifters. I was reading on Reddit again. I hate Reddit, but I love it. The question was a hypothetical. What happens if medicine gets to a place where now we're living, we don't have old age to die from, and we're living hundreds of years? And I'm like, wow, am I tired? I'm not sure I want to live hundreds of years. Beautiful thought, but here's the thing. Still got the safety net at the end. Put up Social Security to 70. We got something there. We spend in between. But what actually happens with clients, they're so reluctant to spend what they saved that here's the discussion I have most often. At some point in a child-free person's life, they are working for their estate, which is not a priority. Usually can't get them to do is switch jobs or do something different. Go open that cupcake shop they wanted to open or whatever. But there's this whatever we call middle-class work ethic or Protestant work ethic or whatever that push people to keep working. The discussion of the 4% rule, I'm not so worried about the money, the numbers. I'm worried about every dollar you're earning is not improving your life. I call it Marie Kondoing your life. Get rid of things that don't bring you joy and do more of the things that do. When I plan for child-free folks, I plan for their life first, then their finances, then their taxes. All the other financial planning does finances first, then life. So the question was about annuities. And in the book, Die with Zero, he does propose them. Now, mind you, he is not a financial planner. He is an engineer. I do not recommend annuities because the hidden costs. I had a really interesting discussion. We were on a webinar, and there's a belief that annuities, it's hard to be a fiduciary and say, hey, yes, it's worth paying those fees. So I do it the hard way. I'm also what's called an advice-only planner. I don't manage assets. I teach other people how to do it. I charge monthly. I don't sell any products. The people that are pushing annuities, they sell them. Same with life insurance. One of my clients, I have 6 episodes on my podcast where I recorded sessions with clients. And in one of them I said, go to your local insurance person they like, get a disability quote for you, because we need one. They walked out with 5 life insurance quotes. Why? Because that's where they make money. And the disability quote was not the right, it was covering $1,200 a month or something like that. It was not even close. And they went, how did that happen? Well, that's what they make. So on the annuities, I think because I don't sell them, it doesn't match the finances. It might be the right answer. The annuities might. People keep trying to convince me of it. But the opaqueness of the fees, pause. Can I make sure to come back next year? Right now, don't ask that question. The introvert in me is like, all these parties, and I'm all for talking to all of you. You can come up to me later, but like, every time I go in a room, but I'm trying to start a conversation. All right. Here's what I will say. All of you that have content creators and have friends, I'm trying to get on every podcast, everything I can get on press, because people don't realize that this exists. So I did one, Wall Street Journal did a full page article, and somebody reached out to me and said, I did not know I'm child free. I am. This is me. Help me. That's actually the problem I have right now. I wish there were like 10 other child free firms. By the way, there's one right now. Like that there are other people that serve child free folks, like as a part, I have colleagues, like I had somebody who does tiny house living and has a lot of child free folks, but they don't primary. I wish a whole lot of people did, because we just have a continuous conversation. The fact that this room is full of non-parents, I don't know what to make of that. Yeah, so the question was, child free folks travel? Absolutely. We also have a lot of expats, so living in another country. If you're going to move to another country long term, I have no clue. Like seriously, because I don't know their rules, their laws. So I got somebody moving to Thailand, I got somebody moving to Portugal, I got somebody, there becomes an issue. Now, we can solve something. So I had somebody come to me who actually, a border citizen in Canada, they actually provide long-term care for them. Beautiful. So some of that makes life easy. The travel, that is one of those areas I do like insurance, actually travel insurance, all that fun stuff. But it's a question of how long you're going to be there. Because long-term care policies, there's one I use. I'm not going to use any company names intentionally. You can talk to me offline. I can explain this. But one of the policies will not cover you anywhere when you're international. The other one covers you for a year, and then you got to come back to the U.S. So at least, we're getting closer. The wills, power of attorney thing for international, you're screwed. There's no answer, because you'd be on their laws, so you at least want to have some paperwork that says who makes decisions. As I've dove into this stuff, the one I've been working for the past 2 years is this question of who makes decisions for us. I've met with attorneys, I've met with firms, banks, trust companies. We're actually going to end up building our own company to do this, a trust company, which, by the way, you want to talk about regulations? Go open a trust company, open a bank, just to serve child-free folks to make decisions for them. But we can't figure out the internet. If you are in Portugal and I get the phone call, hey, what do we do? I'm like, I'll tell you what their paperwork says, but I don't know if it's legal. That is an issue. I know we're at the end of time, but if anyone has other questions, I will stick around. Go ahead.
I do lots with debt planning with freedom. And so instead of that, I choose the whole universe. So talking with people, this comes up a lot, who are child-free, or from youth childless, and they are very aware, like, what do you change for them? And how do I lay that out? How some people putting these shoes I required?
Yeah.
The answer is so that's complicated.
So if you have to run to get drinking, go right ahead, and you can grab a book, whatever I got left. But the question was, how do I handle the anxiety around death and dying, long-term care, all that fun stuff? I added long-term care in there because it's part of this whole package. I have a course, a self-directed, probably 15 courses, 100 videos, and we did a series on estate planning, end of life discussions. I did it with Katie Seppi, who's on the childless side. She runs the childless creative, Chasing Creation. And we got done with the sessions. We're like, damn, this is depressing. We were going to give it out as a freebie. We're like, nobody will watch this because they'll be crying at the end. Yes, it's rough. What I do, by the way, I meet with my clients every month. I don't talk about it the first month. Okay? We work up towards it. And actually, the way I handle it usually is I do their parents' stuff first, then theirs. But there's somebody in my book, she was 50s, and was with somebody for 10, 15 years. And they always joke he was going to die at 50. They weren't married. He died at 50. They had no paperwork in place. Nightmare. And she talks about it, how do you become a widow in your 50s, and how do you deal with it, and you didn't have the paperwork. And I'm like, I'm doing the interview, and I'm like, this is tough stuff. But here's the thing. The only answer is to talk about it. I have this love-hate thing with the question of who's going to take care of you when you're older. I love it because it gives me an opportunity to discuss things. I hate it because of what's implied. Because what's implied is they're expecting their kids to take care of them, which, by the way, is why Plan for Mom and Dad is in here for our child-free folks. When I have people with the tough anxiety, especially around long-term care, I have somebody that I had to wait. Turns out you can't get quotes on long-term care until you're 30. So I had to wait till 30 to get her a quote because we were going to buy long-term care insurance because of the anxiety, not because of the finance. The answer is we put the paperwork, we put the plan, we get the structure, you're good. Now, by the way, still sucks to talk about. Like, Bree, who works for me, she loves talking about death and dying, and I'm like, cool, that's a skill. Go ahead and do that. I think we just need to socialize it and have these discussions. I'm working on this trust company we're building because this company is going to bury me. Literally is going to be the company that buries me because of those fears. My sister might take care of it for me, but I know the company I'm building by legal was fiduciary would do it. That's what we're trying to work around. We just need to start having the conversation. I think what most people, when I start having the conversation, they go, well, who do I trust? That's a whole other discussion. And then they're like, I can't afford long-term care. I'm like, you have to save towards your goals. Which is the priority? What bothers you most? There's no right answer, but the best is to talk about it.
Right. Is the conversation totally different between I'm child-free, but I think I've been sort of rooted myself from people who do have kids.
Yep.
And so how is conversation different and similar to someone who's like, oh, but he's not necessarily they'll take care of you, but how you make your well.
Yep. So my nephews they have a 529. We put money aside. They're getting what's left over. I didn't say I hate kids. We all have to have that caveat. If you have kids that you want to make an impact on, cool. Then you're not truly dying with zero, you're going to pass it on. But here's the discussion I have. Well, can you make a bigger impact on their life now than when you're 80 and die? By the way, the answer is you can't. Because I hope to be at least 80 when I die, and that means my nephews will be, 50s. They won't need the money then. So what I end up doing, people like that, I have somebody, she calls it fun, make the babies love me. It's for her nieces and nephews to go on an international trip when they're in high school, college, to not college funds, kind of go have an experience. We build that into the plan. It's not at the end of life. I have one last question in the back, and then we'll.
Thank you. So I'm not deaf, but our Wellman's action is served for a little bit of years an hour, partially to level who are, and it's certainly got a little bit easier. But I just want to say thank you, because Bart's dad and Fred more than half and go back.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate a parent being in the room. I was hoping for more. I don't know, I was hoping to be staying remotely. No, I didn't really. So what I find, by the way, the people that serve the LGBT community get this, and they're having the same troubles with the software and the structures and the system.
What if then he gets out to the audits and here calling I'm sorry, you can't do Mr. and Siski.
Yeah, the systematic biases against being a couple or being a group. By the way, try doing group planning and financial planning software. Blows it up. I have people doing the Golden Girls group. They all live together and, cool. Awesome. I have romantic groups. I have whatever. Cool. Financial planning, nightmare. Because you got to get 4 people to agree on finances together. Communication's a thing. I think I have to appreciate y'all for being here. My call to action, go find a couple people and be like, hey, we should talk about child-free finances. If we can each do that, it'll be a big thing. And if you want a book, help yourself. I don't know who asked the good questions, but you all can judge appropriate.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a rating or review. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Follow Childfree Wealth on social media or email us at podcast@childfreewealth.com. If you're interested in working together, book a free consultation call by visiting our website, childfreewealth.com. We'll see you next week.